Daithí Regan, good morning to you.
How are things, Adrian?
Is he wrong?
No, he's 100% right in every aspect. And it's not often myself and Ger Loughnane agree on hurling issues. But no, he's absolutely correct. I was down at the Galway Wexford game, and Galway were so anemic and inept, to be honest with you. And Wexford should have won that game. The halftime score was a poor reflection on Wexford because Lee Chin had 4 wides alone in the first half. 6 of 8 wides in the first half from Wexford were easier scored. They were that bad. It was like Wexford of old, but they really played well the second half. But from a Galway perspective, Niall Burke, guy I coached a number of years ago in Oran Mary, and he has been so instrumental for the club this year. He's a guy that's very hot and cold. Niall has never been able to nail down a position on the Galway team consistently. And at the end of the day, a centre back on any team is a key. He's and Ger alluded to it there with Galway. And so you need a centre forward who can pick the lock and basically open up a back line. Niall had a bad day from the freeze, and he had a bad day from general play and was subbed early in the second half. Cathal Cooney is a guy that I just can't figure out his loss of form. I have said this on this show many times. To me, 2 years ago, he was one of the top forwards in the country, and prior to that, but it's a lack of confidence, and it's quite patently clear. Johnny Glynn last year was starting. Cathal was looking to the sideline every time someone was being subbed, and invariably he was being subbed, and it culminated in the All-Ireland final with sub coming on for Galway, and he was actually moving to the sideline and assumed he was coming off. So he's a lack of confidence. That's down to managers to sort that out, and they still haven't sorted it out. Free taking was an issue without Joe. Now, I think Galway people had thought that they were over the stage whereby everything was predicated around how Joe performed. And we always argued it's why Galway couldn't win an All-Ireland final, because you can't rely on one man. And we thought that they'd got over that hump. But patently clear the last day that without him, there weren't. Conor Whelan was superb in the first half. He was the go-to man. And that was it after that. No other forward played well. And if you look where they're going to, Nolan Park, Parnell Park, very, very worrying from a Galway aspect. Now, okay, we might retrospectively look back and say it was a bad performance and Wexford were very good, as it turns out, further down the line. But I suspect it runs deeper than that, because the Galway team I saw were not a team substantiated by the belief that a win gives a very short period of time ago. Very, very disappointing from Galway and very worrying. Garage McInerney, I eulogised him a couple of years ago. He doesn't become a bad player, but Ger Loughnane got it right. Teams aren't hitting it down on top of him. And when you don't hit it down on top of him, he's not a guy that's going to travel from wing to wing from a centre-back base and pick up a lot of ball. He's a guy who likes it down the middle and who stops runners coming down through the middle. So he's a guy that you can isolate and say, how do we work around him? And teams are successfully doing that.
So that suggests that obviously teams are figuring them out, because I was just about to ask how he actually arrived at that point, whether it was a lessening of the hunger, whether it was old age in some cases, as Loughnane pointed out there. What is the single biggest reason as to why we've arrived here, outside of the obvious of Canning's injury?
Well, there isn't an obvious outside of it. Because if Joe Canning was playing the last day, Galway win. Like, I wouldn't necessarily agree in relation to Daithí Burke. He's an animal, and he was as good the last day as he was any other day. You know, it doesn't matter what hurling that guy has played. He is still a key player, number 3. So you can't bypass him. If you want to score goals, you're going to have to go through him. And that's why teams don't score goals, is because he's so solid. And Galway are smart. They don't move him away from the square. He's a top-class fullback, and that hasn't changed. There is a problem in the way teams are looking to circumvent Garage McInerney. There's no doubt. I prefer to see him do what he did a couple of years ago and sit further back and not allow himself be dragged out and just hold that middle. But then that obviously means you've got to be sitting the deep lying midfielder to kind of fill that gap. But what stands out as playing as a Pikestaff is the fact that Joe Canning and Joe Canning's sheer brilliance is the difference between Galway not winning the last day and winning the last day. Because like I say, if Canning plays, Galway win the last day. He wouldn't have missed a free for starters. I think Niall Burke missed 3 or 4. There was no leader up there. Joe Canning is the key, and that's I thought we'd move away from it, but when you look at it, it's just like, you know, you're taking the heartbeat out of a team. And Galway had no leader up front. Conor Whelan is positioned so close to goal that he can't influence the game near the middle third, where there's a lot of ball floating around nowadays in hurling nowadays. If Joe's on that, he gets on ball.
Do you risk Joe Canning Sunday week, I think it is, if it's 50-50, like say there's a decent opportunity that they might go to Parnell Park and win without him? I know decent opportunity is actually probably putting it a bit strongly at this point. Like, what do you do if it's, say he's 70% fit, because you know you're risking him potentially down the line, and we know how detrimental that might be?
I was in Madrid last Saturday night and I watched Harry Kane being risked and it patently didn't work. So my opinion on this is Galway will still be around towards the latter end of the championship. You keep Joe Canning fit. I had Galway supporters telling me earlier in the year that they were flabbergasted that Joe Canning was playing all the league games. Now, I get where Micheál Donoghue is coming from. Obviously, you can't cotton wool a player. Well, okay, now you do cotton wool him. He's going to need game time. I think you get Joe Canning right, and I don't think that you risk Joe Canning unless he is 100% fit, because Galway shorn of Joe Canning later in the year will not win an All-Ireland final. Galway, with Joe Canning firing fully fit on all cylinders, have as good a chance as anybody else of winning an All-Ireland final, because others around him, he brings them into it, and they visibly rise when he's playing. Without him, Galway won't win an All-Ireland final, I would contend.
Does all that mean you're going for Kilkenny this weekend?
Yes, it does, yeah. But based on what I saw, I mean, we can only judge game to game. We can take two judgments. You can base Galway over 2 years, and we can keep reverting back to 2017. 2017 is in the past. We judge Galway on what we see now, and without their main man operating and firing on all cylinders, you're talking about a team shorn of 30% of its capacity to do damage and win these big games. And Kilkenny are simmering nicely. They got over a really tough game that I, along with many others, felt that Dublin had a marvellous chance, and they did, and they brought Kilkenny to the precipice. But Kilkenny still saw it out. Pádraig Walsh, obviously, to me, was a catalyst the last day, but they've got the rest of the guys back now. And Kilkenny on home turf, I believe, based on what I saw the last day from Galway, I do expect an improvement from Galway. Of course I expect an improvement, but I do think Kilkenny will win that at home.
Okay, the Limerick-Clare game obviously is one that we wanted to talk about, and Clare copping a lot of heat after what happened last weekend. Ger was also making the point with Shane during the week that they're a team that maybe at times are slightly overpraised. I mean, it seems on one respect that might be like a little bit harsh, given that like maybe they haven't been winning All-Irelands over the last couple of years, but like they have had some big results and been there deep in the championship late in the year. Is Ger trying to poke the bear on that one a little bit, or is he right again on that one?
No, I think he is trying to poke the bear, and I think that's a residue of, it's like a man once said to me many years ago down in Clare. I was down on business and I spoke to a very old wise man, and I think Cyril Lyons had been appointed as Clare manager, and the guys around in the premises I was in that day were expressing a little bit of surprise, and somebody said it was Ger Loughnane that had actually promoted him and recommended him, and an old guy turned around behind me and he said to me, Ger's a very cute man. He said, as long as Clare aren't winning All-Ireland finals, Ger will always be a hero down there. So, you know, maybe there's something in that. I do think there's a residue there, to be honest with you. In relation to Clare, certainly a bit of an enigma. I wasn't at the game last weekend, but Michael Dignan covered it, and I spoke to him during the week about it. I read Anthony Daly's comments with interest. He's the first guy I've seen coming out and start to touch on, you know, a little bit too much of this strategy, a little bit too much reverting back to systems and the whole thing. Let's have straight talk, you know, about how you go out and win games of hurling. There's just too many people reverting back to, well, the system and the strategy didn't quite work for us today. Daly is kind of saying, you know, enough of this bull talk, to be honest with you. You know, have your strategy, go out and hurl it. If it's good enough, it's good enough. Michael Dignan expressed an opinion to me that Clare were playing into a gale in the first half and reverted with a sweeper system in the second half. And he just said it was incredulous to think that a really good Tipperary side were held to restricted to 6 points at half-time, that game was eminently winnable, and Clare reverted back to type. Now, the problem there is, if you only play one way, you know, if you have a gale, you know, why not shoot from 70 and 80 yards? And that should be practice down training. You should allow for all of these things, but they just wanted to work with true lines, and Tipperary were fantastic. Tipperary, a team that actually seemed to be happy to give frees away at the moment. They cut the free count way down in the second half, but they're intent on letting teams know that they're there, sending out really strong messages. From a Clare point of view, I was disappointed in what I heard last weekend. I can't comment because I didn't see the game. I think this is a really critical game the weekend. I think Clare are still a good side. But I watched Limerick and Tipperary. And in the first half of that game, I always felt Limerick were about 2 or 3 points away from creating enough distance in the first half from Cork. I thought they were slightly the better side, and I was impressed what I saw. But Cork wouldn't go away. But I absolutely expected a response from Limerick last weekend, and I don't expect that's going to stop on Sunday.
All right, before we let you away, we do want to get your thoughts on Cork as well. Cork Waterford this weekend. It did strike me that we haven't seen Cork obviously now in a few weeks, and there's a good chance that they do a job on a Waterford team that are struggling at the minute. But even for that, Daithí, we may not still know where this Cork team are actually at.
Well, that's a fair point, and I think John Moyler, you're echoing to a point what John Moyler is saying, where he's looking for consistency. Now, some are saying there'll be a really good response from Waterford. That's immaterial. If you scored 10 points last week, of course you expect a response. There should have been a response after the Clare game. But as I've said on this programme previously since the start of the year, Waterford were never going to be contenders this year, and that's been borne out. So Cork, to me, need to go for the jugular. They will beat Waterford. Because if Waterford beat Cork and people say, well, it was a reaction and wasn't it great to see and what you'd expect, well, then Cork have no business talking about being contenders. So Cork will beat Waterford, and Cork are contenders and genuine contenders.
Apart from the result, what was Madrid like?
It was all about the result, wasn't it? I mean, you know, I don't want to look back for the next 10 years and talk about 32 degrees and it was great crack and the food was lovely. You know, you want to look back in 10 years' time and say we won it. And I think Spurs will have big regrets about that. I would have started Kane, but I wouldn't have started Dele Alli. And many Tottenham fans I spoke with and have been engaged with during the week, I'd have started Lucas Moura. Dele Alli's form has been very poor for 5 or 6 months. So has Eriksen's. I would have started Lucas Moura. Either way, if it wasn't centrally down the middle, I would have played him either side of Kane, but I would have gone with Harry Kane. It was a great atmosphere, wonderful occasion. I slapped my hands because it was in the Liverpool end and it was never as quiet in my life at a match. I'll never, ever, ever do that again, I can assure you. I will never do it again. It was pretty scary, lads, but the Liverpool fans were unbelievable. But it was pretty scary. I had a couple of comments passed to me, which I guess you'd expect. I mean, we think it's a GA game where you sit cheek by jowl with someone from the next county, but when you're sitting in a sea of red with a Spurs jersey on you, I got a lot of looks and I got a few comments, and I sat and I politely applauded when the game was over and shook a couple of hands and got the hell out of there, I can tell you.
What sort of comments, Daithí?
What was I doing there? Where did you get your tickets? Where did it come from a Liverpool end? Why are Liverpool Football Club having fans that a ticket ends up with a Tottenham fan? Stuff like that, because we actually collected the tickets in the Novotel through the Liverpool agency, so the security was Liverpool and all the lines of fans were Liverpool, and I'm there with one other guy collecting fans. So a guy had us on his camera on his phone and said he was going to bring it to the attention of the club that who was selling tickets, how much were they sold for. We got them through Genuine Outlet, through a mate of ours who they own a suite in Liverpool. So there was 4 Liverpool fans, and he brought 2 of his pals, you know, who happened to be Spurs fans. But some of them weren't happy over it, and I get that. When you see the breakdown in the stadium, it's not the dumb thing in the away ends. You don't have, you know, a Spurs fan in the Liverpool end, no more than you won't have a Liverpool fan in the Spurs end. You know, and you look at even last night with England and Portugal, it's a recipe. I mean, if Spurs had won, it could have been a different kettle of fish, but I mean, we're all about me when the game is over, telling me it was
I think it was
great.
just as well for your safety that they were Tottenham were beaten. But
well, I wondered what would have happened. I mean, but yeah, it was a wonderful experience. Yeah. All right, Daithí, pleasure as always. Thanks a million. See you guys.
Cheers. Thanks a lot. Daithí Regan on the line there ahead of the weekend's hurling, and a little bit extra as well thrown in there.